Greetings, comrades. When the audit process reveals an error that requires a correcting entry in the General Journal, I strongly encourage my students to create some ledgers so that they're able to visualize and map out how to rectify the error, particularly in terms of getting the matching debits and credits dollar-wise. So if you're not provided the ledgers, get some scrap paper, rule them up. I'll illustrate how with 3 examples. Let's start with a nice easy one. Right, so if we look at this scenario here, we've incorrectly recorded a wages payment of $530 as $350. So step 1, let's think about the accounts affected by the error. So we've got a wages account, so let's create a wages ledger, and the other one would be, given it's a payment, cash at bank. Step 2. Let's record in the ledger what the error was. We won't worry about cross-referencing. We're just going to put the dollars on the debit and credit side. So we would have done a $350 error in the wages. That would have been a debit. It's an expense going up. And we would have done a $350 credit to our cash at bank, the assets going down. What we should have done was a $530 entry for both those accounts. So therefore, the next step is just in red going to write what we should have done. We should have done a $530 debit to our expense and a $530 credit to our asset. So therefore, in order to correct this error, we need to top up our wages by $180, the difference between the $530 and $350. And we're $180 short in our bank, so we need a credit entry there for $180. So then we go downstairs to our General Journal, and we just follow the purple font. Wages, we need a correcting entry for $180, and cash at bank, a correcting entry of $180 on the credit side. All right, let's ramp up the complexity slightly. This time we've got a cash purchase of a vehicle, $45K plus GST. We've incorrectly recorded it as $54K. So let's think about the 3 accounts that are affected by this error. So we've got a vehicle that's out. We've got a GST component, and given it was a cash purchase, again, that brings the bank into play. Step 2, let's record the error in our ledger just to help us think about how to perform the correcting entry. So we've incorrectly put $54K in the vehicle. 10% of that is $5,400, so that would have been a debit to our GST because it reduces our liability, and our asset cash at bank's gone down by the combined amount of those two, $59,400. That's the error. Next step is let's work out what we should have had. So $45K, we should have done a $45K debit to our vehicle, our asset going up. We should have done a $4,500 debit to GST clearing, and therefore we should have only credited our cash at bank by the combined amount of those two, $49,500. Now, we can't just do negative debit entries and negative credit entries in either the ledger or the General Journal. So therefore, in order to reduce these balances, we just need to go to the opposite side. So therefore, what we're going to do this time is we need to work out the difference between these two. 54 minus 45, that's 9K. So we're going to do a credit entry to our vehicle. So 54 minus the 9 gives us a 54 balance in our vehicle. Ditto with GST, 54 minus 900, a credit entry, brings us back to a balance of 4,500. And you can probably see what's going to happen with our bank. We need to subtract 9,900 on the debit side, so we can end up with that 49.5K balance. So in terms of our GJ, let's start with our debit. We did a $9,900 debit in our cash at bank. We had a $9,000 correcting entry in our vehicle, and we had a $900 correcting entry in our GST clearing account. All right, this is our last example, and we're going to ramp up the complexity once again. So this time we've got an $850 credit purchase of inventory. We've incorrectly recorded it as a $580 cash purchase of inventory. So this is going to impact 4 accounts. Our inventory. So again, what you need to do is to think visually, create 4 ledgers. Our GST clearing is going to be out. Accounts payable, given it was a credit purchase. Cash at bank. All right, step 2, let's record the error. So they've incorrectly recorded it as a $580 cash purchase. So therefore that would have been a debit to your inventory asset going up of $58, or 10% of 580 is 58. That would have been a debit to our GST because we're reducing our liability to the tax office. Combine these two totals, and we had a $638 entry in our bank. Now let's work out what we should have done. Going back here, $850 purchase, so we should have done a debit entry to our inventory for $850, a debit entry of $85 to our GST. Add these two up, and we should have done a $935 credit to our supplier, our accounts payable liability going up. So the next thing we need to do is let's work out how to rectify the error, and we'll work our way down. So our inventory, we need to top up by the difference between $850 and $580. So that means we need a $270 debit. We need a $27 addition to our GST debit side. We need to bring this accounts payable to $935 credit. So that's just going to require a $935 credit. And we need to reduce this bank to 0. So we're just going to do a $638 debit so that we're back to a 0 balance. Let's have a look at what this looks like in our general journal, because it's a bit complex. We're working with the purple figures here. So we did a $270 top up of our inventory on the debit side. We did a $27 debit to our GST. We did a $638 debit to our cash at bank to bring it back to 0. And if you add those 3 amounts, you'll get the $935 that we credited to our accounts payable. Bit of a tip here, always make sure your debits equal your credits.